Everybody wants James Brown.
Well, you know, James Brown is you. James Brown is you out there. I didn't make James Brown. Thank God that he gave me the energy to carry out the role. But I was just playing a part for humanity. And I'm still playing a part for humanity. That's my role. And my role has gotten beyond a social thing. Because a social thing will remain the same until we change it individually. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we got to change ourselves individually, you know. You can't expect people to keep changing it for you. That's like getting your food and asking somebody to eat it for you. It's the same thing you have to do yourself. And I found it out over the 60s. You know, I gave my heart and everything to it. But when the going got rough, a lot of people, 90% of the politicians backed up and walked away from me. I had to come back with God help, another direction. I came back to the country rock club.
Godfather of soul, Godfather of hip hop, Godfather by design, James Brown. If you don't know, get it in, do the knowledge. This is Brooklyn Shanti Presents. It's a Grammy Award winning week and weekend. I'm out and about all around the Los Angeles area, interviewing peeps, filming peeps, in studios, making things. It's a great creative sprint time. Today, I'm gonna talk to my homie Xander Farr. Homie that created Aderly Productions, but also is behind a lot of the strategy at Coachella, South by Southwest. He's an artist, he's a producer, and he's also a connector, living on a translation layer. But right now, I'm gonna get into the music I wanna hear.
Hey yo, B, I'm sick of listening to the same old. Give me some of that new shit. You know that shit I can funk with. Yeah, I hear that new TX tape is like kicking big flavors from the bass tip. Pop that shit in and pump it up 1,000. Yeah! Pumping loud, egocentrically well to motivate myself to move the crowd. Never underestimate the powers of percussion coinciding with my rhymes to ensure that you're running to the dance floor to bust a move to my groove and assume like I'm out of control. Applaud, but don't step up because I think that you know that I'm mad. Yes, you know I'm definitely bold in this jam. I made a point to make it my goal, and I've warned you. So don't say that you haven't been told that I am in effect. And Homey, don't be playing that.
Get up, pack it in, let me begin. I came to win, battle me, that's a sin. I won't ever slack up, punk, you better back up. Try and play the role and you're the whole crew will act up. Get up, stand up, come on, throw your hands up if you got the feeling. Jump up, touch the ceiling, monks, let's a funk flow. Someone's fucking junk, yo, I'll bust them in the eye. And then I'll take the punks out, feeling funky. Amps in the trunk and I got more rhymes than this cops at a Dunkin' Donut shop. Sure enough, I got props from the kids on the hill, plus my mom and my pops. I came to get down, I came to get down. So get out your seat and jump around. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump around, check it out, y'all. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump up and get down. Jump, 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 jump. Everybody jump, 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 jump. Everybody jump, 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 jump. I'll serve your ass like John McEnroe. If your girl steps up, I'm smacking the hoe. Word to your moms, I came to drop bombs. I got more rhymes and the Bible's got psalms. And just like the prodigal son, I've returned. Anyone stepping on me, you'll get burned. Cause I got lyrics, but you ain't got none. If you come to battle, bring a shotgun. But if you do, you're a fool, cause I do to the death. Trying to step to me, you take your last breath. I got the skill, come get your fill. Cause when I shoot the gift, I shoot the kill. I came to get down, I came to get down. So get out your seat and jump around. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump around, check it out, y'all. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump up and get down. Jump, jump.
Listen to the sound that pounds, I jump around. I'm no clown, I get down to the funk. Listen to the wig out and step to the rear, dear, cause I'm here. The P to the E to the T-E rockin'. The runs in your stocking, so hun puts a lock in. Chillin' with the house of pain, blood stains the ground. I jump around.
I'm the cream of the crop, I rise to the top. I never eat a pig cause a pig is a cop. Or better yet, a Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Trying to play me out like as if my name was Sega. But I ain't going out like no punk bitch. Get used to one style AO when I might switch it up and around. Then buck, get down, put out your head and then you wake up in the dawn of the dead. I'm coming to get ya, I'm coming to get ya. Spitting out lyrics, homie, I'll wet ya. I came to get down, I came to get down. So get out your seat and jump around. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump around, check it out, y'all. Jump around, jump up and get down. Jump up and get down. Jump, jump, jump. Everybody jump, jump, jump. Check it out, jump, 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 jump. Everybody jump, jump, jump. Check it out, y'all. Jump, jump, jump. Everybody jump, jump, jump. Check it out, y'all. Jump, jump, jump. Everybody jump. Check it out, y'all.
should step. So pass me the crazy story, let me do the Q-tip. What is a 40 if I can't take a sip? Sometimes I drive slow, sometimes I drive fast. Sometimes I'm on E, sometimes I get gas. So check the stretch, short step to the left with an OE tap on the top. Pass it back, give a tap to the tab. Pass the side and keep it going down my throat, I keep it flowing. Styles keep growing, we don't brown bag it. The label be showing and we don't give a damn if the O's be knowing. From the dip to my lip, I like to pass it with the grip. Shorty dog is in the cypher, so you better not skip. So tap the bottle and twist the cap. Tap the bottle and twist the cap. Yeah, tap the bottle and twist the cap. And pass it around the crew because the Ruby all that. So tap the bottle and twist the cap. Yeah, tap the bottle and twist the cap. Yeah, tap the bottle and twist the cap. And pass it around the crew because the Ruby all that. So tap the bottle and twist the cap. Yeah, tap the bottle and twist the cap. Yeah, tap the bottle and twist the cap. And pass it around the crew because the Ruby all that.
A friendly game of baseball, cutting up the 8-ball. Keep the bases loaded, happy endings if you break law. Parolies all your homies with the ankle bracelet. Looking back in the pen, cause it's piss violated. Ski mask, mobbing on your allies. Trash bag, filling up with crack valves. Cold corpse, bending in the bathtub. Illegal massage parlors for back rubs. Senator Sniffy, white boy, crazy glue. Gas him on a tightrope, abandoned apartment. Fire burns in the carpet. Robbing still for a good cause. To split up the money on hardwood floors. Gotta write it to get it out. Take a flight or bike it out. Computer or type it out. Yell it or fight it out. Walk it or hitchhike it out. Vodka and Sprite it out. Through the dark then light it out. Card game or dice it out. Broad day or snipe it out. Hand glide and slide it out. We out.
I mean, you could be influenced by cats but not copy them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So the thing was for him, it was Ish and Nas, right?
Ish, Nas, and T Strong.
From T Strong.
Yeah. Flow for flow it was T Strong. For lyrics it was Nas, and for voice it was Ish for sure.
From Digable.
But then always having a love for sci-fi and Star Wars, and I always loved that futuristic element of things. That was like my, okay, his voice, his lyrics, his flow, but then I'm gonna like my syrup on all of that is like this fascination with future and time and space and
for me it was kind of
fashion.
The fact I wasn't even rhyming at the time, you know what I'm saying? So who I pulled from was meth, but you can't sound like meth. That's the whole thing. But to have your voice projected, so when they hear you, they know it's you. They're not rhyming, quoted from Derek X. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't rhyme every line per se. You know what I'm saying? I like to throw it off a little bit. Because I don't like the uniform rhyme style. You know what I mean? So those two guys, I would say, influenced.
But your man T Strong was like, I'm really beginning to pick up the mic and deliver the radical rhythm. People be telling me that I be ripping the jam. Damn, check out the rhythm in one line. In 92.
Nah, he was on it. He got another joint with
92
to Rockefeller Till We Die joint with him and T Strong.
With Hov
and your man gets off on that joint with that rhythmatic shit.
He just and then you talk to T, and T was like, well, yeah, I got it from here, and like, so it came from somewhere, but you like their interpretation of it, and then you just applied your own to it, and it's just gonna keep going like that. But to acknowledge where you got it from, I think is a really big thing within itself as well, and I think a lot of today is missing that. Like, we don't acknowledge where you got it from as if it makes you less than. No, it actually catapults you, in the sense of knowing that you got it from somewhere and you climbed into another chamber with it. So I think acknowledging keeping that humility is a vital thing right now.
Some elements of the Willie Lynch, right, is to always have the young ones think they're better than the older ones. That the older ones can't tell them nothing, so they won't respect them, right? I'm looking to it deeper as far as science is concerned. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it'll be a better thing because we could put you on so you won't make the mistakes we made.
You know, sometimes we're not prepared for adversity. When it happens, sometimes we're caught short. We don't know exactly how to handle it when it comes up. Sometimes we don't know just what to do when adversity takes over. And I have advice for all of us. I got it from our pianist, Joe Zawinul, who wrote this tune. And it sounds like what you're supposed to say when you have that kind of problem. It's called Mercy, Mercy, Mercy.
We lounge, stay flat, no disrespect, G-Lep. The natural flair with the flesh ass here. Style baggy out, loud, slick, creamy and fresh. East coast to west.
Brooklyn, to uptown, to the Universal fam, to the 7 and the Crescent.
That's the case, my bass tastes just like ism. The wisdom ladybug, play the thug. I represent the circle plus, prepared to bust lateral. Brooklyn walks in action, talks New York now. No wonder who came beyond the ass liquor as we got these shots for establishments with the ends. Make money, all money make, money take it.
True, that's why I play the curves, just blow her minds. Stir my slang words cause of my 18 karat fronts. That's on love. He got a dub, word the real feeling. Sound boy killing, villains top down here. Blow is the sound here, son. 7 crew, just me, 21 guns, no stripping my gems. 6 puffs later and I'm dipping again. Blowed out, afroed out,
Brooklyn till you die.
no doubt.
That's how we Eastbourne beats, can noise on. Lovely, all over the city in your tape deck glass hitting 7 R's and the fat fly sneakers and the candy
To the
flies.
queens everywhere, dress to the nappy hair. To the mixtape crew, to the boogie down Bronx.
Now it's the return of the Mr. Doodle Big by the A and the G train in Brooklyn's where I live. And what I give is the cosmic funk, baby paw. Yeah, my 7R squad rocks hard for the vanguard. Cause mentally we're like 7th dimension dwellers who in physical form swarms a 6th sector. And I betcha Digable planets will never let you straight too long without the cool out song.
Only 4 and straight to the point. Bill Powers percent up in the joint. So what's up? Listen up, huh? What's the matter with your world, girly girl? In control, lie, no control. Digable, bump high, struggle I for life, with or without. Change the route, no cries, your eyes, it just be like that. Sometimes it just be like that. That's right.
We the hustlers, supreme prop catchers, don't sweat us. We do it so you can't forget us. Cause black motion is ocean style. The beats in Brooklyn is crazy.
To all of y'all mind, you was that guy. To all smooth rock vibes, forget your peeps when you
Yes, it's the notorious, vanity glorious, lyrical soundstorm of the Manchu monk once again blowing your mind. And I'm just floating through the U and I burst, huffing and puffing that Franklin till it hurts. Cause I'm laid back, I stay fat. Herbs get kicked to the curb, so ease back. When God is strapped tight, Manchu clan, I pick it up for my family, foes and fans.
Bust it, I'm a commie, Tommy gun style, money ain't nothing. MCs I be cutting, just like lasers, razors. Slash, slick is the player, blazer, nickel bag for the planet Brooklyn. Dwells within the word, the feelers, hustlers, dealers, natural born chillers with the jewels of gleam. Change front strings and those that scheme on those 4 things. So the streets I walk, the slang I wisdom, puffism, stash tools, son, Brooklyn rules, plays it cool. Dudes recognize this sound when pawn knife, wanda, selector, calm down. If you can't feel me, don't reach for hand slaps. I still slick raps, watch out for gun claps now. Eyes dips, lovely, murder wap niggas, big up, one bag.
Everybody gather round. The planet's getting ready to have a throwdown. Show the pound that you know this Brooklyn bound. Just in case somebody starts tripping. Everybody gather round. The planet's getting ready to have a throwdown. Show the pound that you know this Brooklyn bound.
I love it when you call me Big Poppa, it's your stop, but the rhyme drop, but I love it when you call me Big Poppa, it's your stop, but the rhyme drop, but I love it when you call me Big Poppa, it's your stop, but the rhyme drop, but I love it when you call me Big Poppa, it's your stop, but. For all the ladies in the place with style and grace, allow me to lace these lyrical douches in your bushes who rock grooves and make moves with all the mommies. The back of the club, sipping Moet is where you find me. The back of the club, macking hoes, my crew's behind me. Mad question asking, blunt passing, music lasting. But I just can't quit because one of these honeys Biggie got to creep with, sleep with, keep the F a secret. Why not? Why blow up my spot? Cause we both got hot. Now check it. I got more Mac than Craig and in the bed. Believe me, sweetie, I got enough to feed the needy. No need to be greedy. I got mad friends with Benzes. See notes by the layers. True fucking players. Jump in the Rover and come over. Tell your friends jump in the GS3. I got the chronic by the tree. By the tree. By the tree. By the tree. When you call me Big Poppa,
honey, really I'm asking. Most of these niggas think they be macking, but they be acting. Who they attracting with that line? What's your name? What's your sign? Soon as he buy that wine, I just creep up from behind and ask you what your interests are. Who you be with? Things to make you smile. What numbers to dial? You gon' be here for a while? I'm gon' call my crew. You gon' call your crew. We can rendezvous at the bar around 2. Plans to leave, throw the keys to little C's. Pull the truck up front and roll up the next blunt so we can steam on the way to the telly. Go fill my belly. A T-bone steak, cheese, eggs, and Welch's great. Conversate for a few, cause in a few we gon' do what we came to do. Ain't that right, boo? Forget the telly, we just go to the crib and watch a movie in the jacuzzi. Smoke L while you do me, while you do me, while you do me, while you do me. When you call me Big Pop, I love it when you call me Big Pop. I love it when you call me, when you call me, when you call me Big Pop. Don't stop, drop, 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 drop. Big Pop, don't stop, drop, 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 drop. Big Pop, don't stop, drop, 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 drop. Big Pop, don't stop, drop, 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 drop.
So I'm sitting here with the magnificent Xander Farr. How you doing, sir?
Alive and well today.
The creator of Aderly Productions.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been with so many different organizations that the world knows about that don't know that you were one of the founders of. We don't need to go into that just yet. But what sits before me is a transformed post-pandemic, post-hip-hop, post-everything individual that's come out the cocoon. I would say a butterfly, but I mean, there's something else going on. Like there's like AI going on, there's some hybridization. It's like you're a different curious strain.
Yeah.
Not trying to blow smoke up your ass, but.
Yeah, it's a new world right now, that's for sure. Everything that was important, I think, got readdressed, you know, and a lot of loss, a lot of suffering, a lot of combative people and situations and desperation and sadness and loss and tragedy. So I feel like everybody got a lot shaken up in their lives. I certainly did. And, you know, I think creatives got a lot of juice back into their creative flows. I certainly was able to take that step away, and a lot of people that I know in the creative space now really cite 2020 as their impetus, you know, the year that they got back into their shit.
So let's back up for the folks listening real quick.
Okay.
All right, you and me have been circling for like 12 years. We met in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You've always been bi-coastal, and you were one of the first people to tell me, Shanti, you should be bi-coastal. And you know, here I am on like my second go. They say third time's a charm, so I'm thinking like, this is my second go. But you're one of the larger reasons for why I stuck around, and I'm sticking it out.
Yeah.
So you and I also have another similarity. We were both born in the Carolinas. Mm-hmm. We both became musicians first. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your story. Like, you began as a percussionist, right?
Drummer. My dad got me a drum set when I was like 2 or 3, something like that. Kind of thought it might have been a present against my mom as much as it was for me. Luckily, my mom was really into music. She was a singer, and so she loved me playing the drums. She always used to say she would like dance around the house cleaning and doing her things, which I've heard people who suck on the drums just in my own lessons, and so I think she's an angel for having that mentality and that encouragement. But yeah, I got into it real young. By like 5th grade, when you had to choose chorus or band, I was already like, I'm a drummer. I'm a
professional drummer back then.
That's my thing.
Yeah, by 5th grade, you're like, you know what?
My mindset was there.
Yeah.
And you know, by 6th grade, I went into middle school with my jazz instructor, Barbara Tobin, who brought me in to perform with her jazz trio and quartet at these regional jazz festivals in Charlotte and around Carolinas, you know. And so that was a big piece for me, encouraged a lot of the, you know, and validated a lot of the time I spent and interest that I had in drums and in being a performer. And I was that character, just a drummer. That's all I cared about all through high school. I got into more metal and, you know, learned blast beats and learned crazy speed through drumline and through studying all that stuff. Whereas in middle school, I was into like jazz, funk, hip hop, you know, slowed down. But I was learning music for the first time in middle school. You know what I mean? Like the standards, learning the Blue Book, learning, you know, Low Rider, you know, and being 12 and being like, this is Low Rider, sick. Thinking that was the coolest song in the world because it had like a little cowbell part or some shit.
Yeah.
And then when I got to university, I wheeled it back into jazz program performance and studied with Steve Bailey and Gerald Chinette and got to learn a lot more about dynamics and listening to the whole project and being aware of like what each instrument was doing, looking at the, you know, the sheet music for everybody and seeing this like dynamic shift going on here in the guitars or in the piano or whatever, and trying to like play along to those things, thinking more big picture holistically about the music. And also then in my university years, I was hit by a drunk driver. And yeah, so when I was 21, I got hit by a drunk driver. Guy ran a red light one night, and I was in the hospital for like a week. I was in bed for months after that, recovering. I was in a wheelchair for months after that, recovering further. Had to drop out of a semester.
What was your mobility like? You were like completely zero mobility.
Laid up in bed for 2.5 months. And then I got a wheelchair and I tried to go back to school, but it was like too painful. So after 2 or 3 weeks, I was just like, I'm miserable. Like I can't even focus in class. I was on too many painkillers to even be present, you know what I mean, mentally. So I just took a step away. And then when I came back that next semester after that, I had a real interesting thing. My right ankle was crushed in that accident, and I had to get metal to like hold it back together and everything. It was still healing. So when I first got back on the kit, that's my bass drum pedal. And anytime I would, you know, boom, boom, it was like a shock wave of pain would go up my whole leg, because I also had, you know, broken my leg, cracked my shin, you know, a couple other back and like other pieces that was just like a whole wave effect, you know, from this drum resonating through me. And I was like, damn, you know, I'm not gonna be able to play drums anymore. This is horrible. So I thought I would switch and I'd do a left foot lead bass drum. And when I went back into jazz performance, one of the classes I was taking was rhythm section techniques with Steve Bailey. And he said that during that time when I got on the kit and started relearning with my left foot as the bass drum and my right foot as the hi-hat and just soloing that way and just everything, he said that my playing got like this really interesting style to him. You know, it was like much more syncopated, much more emotionally inspiring to him because it wasn't so mechanical. And I kind of learned that lesson, you know, in fills and things like that. You just get to a point where you're like, look what I can do, you know? And when you then are challenged to be able to do that, you're forced to be inventive in more creative ways, put more space into it, right? And that's when I really learned, like, the music happens between the notes, you know?
That's what's up.
Yeah.
That's
So
what's up.
that's where musically I was there. And then as I was coming out of this recovery, I had like 1.5 years left. And during that time, I tried to play with my old band Mondays Off. We tried to like get it back together. I was fighting through a lot of pain after trying to rehearse and stuff with them, but I was still pushing through. And I was in physical therapy that second year, actually, while I was about 11 months after the first accident. and I was riding my motorcycle.
First accident.
So I was hit by a drunk driver in my van, my band van.
Yeah.
That was the big one, and then like 10 and a half months after that, I was riding my motorcycle and a plumber backed out of a driveway into the street with like traffic moving, all of us moving. It was a long driveway, so it's just like you just assume he's just getting to the end and then he's gonna hit the brakes and wait for the moment, you know? And he didn't. He just like continued right into the street. And so it wasn't too bad. I kicked the bike out toward, you know, the truck and like pushed myself off to the side, but I like tumbled and rolled down the side, so it fucked up a little bit of my recovery, you know what I mean? It kind of set me back again.
So in total, you were hemmed up for like 2 years.
About 2.5 or so, I'd say, yeah. About 2 years though, yeah. Because then I finally graduated, and when I was in those recovery, especially the last part of the recovery, last year, you know, I got with a really great physician who was helping me learn about like the spinal columns and all the things and like what I could do for myself to keep stretching. And I related a lot of it to just playing as a drummer, right? You always crouched over, you always leaned into it. And so keeping like your seat of your hips even and your sacrum and everything, and you're like aligning the weight of your upper body to sit properly. I was like, I know this stuff, doc, because I do this with drums, you know? And it was like, he was like, yeah, that part. So he helped me a lot, but I was focused on that. I was still, at that point, walking with a cane. I had to walk with a cane for a year as a 22-year-old, which was weird. But I had a big intention to like overcome that.
And through all this, you're playing through the pain.
I was playing as much as I could. We weren't touring or anything. We played, I think, a couple shows. It was sad for me. It was real hard.
Were you rehearsing? Like
we were rehearsing, yeah.
So you had a little bit. Was it an outlet that kept your inspiration up? Like, what was the effect to be able to play through that time period?
Yeah.
Like, was it therapeutic?
It was tough. It was challenging, physically and mentally, especially because I wanted to, and all the guys in my band, you know, we had kind of reached a point of this group where we had a big horn section, you know, everybody had been playing together some years, and now everybody's at like the graduate level in university, and these are like players, performance majors, you know, so it was a joy to play with these guys. They were just super talented, but everybody was also like about to graduate and don't really know where it's going, and I was a lot of that charge as just a organized person and like putting it all together. So it fizzled a little bit, and in that fizzling, I wanted really to focus on like proving that I wasn't gonna walk with a cane forever and all this kind of shit. And so I bought a one-way ticket to Europe when I graduated, and I spent 6 months backpacking. And in the time period of my graduation, which was at 1 semester late, so I graduated in December, I worked for 6 months saving money to then do this trip. And during that 6 months, I thought a lot about what I was doing, how I wanted to stay close to music, and that's where I started Zendali Productions. And I had a buddy of mine, I was like, let's throw shows, you know, let's do parties. It's a college town. It's perfect. You know, we can do this. We make a bunch of money, and I've got all the contacts already. I know these bands.
The way I know Zendali Productions, you were one of the first promoters to put on people like Bass Nectar. You were one of the first people, like before America knew what EDM was, right? EDM was a term they were using in Europe, but under a very different context, right? We're talking about intelligent dance music and electronic dance, like IDM, EDM. These terms were affixed to different types of artists.
Right. Yeah.
And what American music fans don't understand is once it came to America, that's when it started shifting and changing in the meaning and definition. But what you guys were doing, you guys were bringing through like purest electronic dance music.
Yeah, those were good days, man.
Yeah, and it was early days, right?
Yeah.
That's before South by Southwest. It's before anybody was picking up on
South by. Well, yeah, before South by was happening, but they were
doing indie rock. Yeah, they hadn't even picked up fully on hip hop yet.
Yeah.
But what you guys were doing, in the Carolinas and on the East Coast was far more progressive. And and I know I met you a number of years after that, but that's when like the momentum had started, right?
Yeah, it was.
Who are some of the other artists that you brought through early days?
I mean, you know, I did AK-1200. Man, Number 9 was a sick producer out of the Northeast. You know, Datsik, before anybody knew about him. Actually, those are some of the shows. I did a Space Academy series with all of these electronic DJs that were, you know, obscure from like random parts of the world. And that's what got me my kind of cred, I guess, to book other bigger events later and do other bigger acts, because some agents had heard of the lineups. And they were like, damn, how'd you get X, Y, and Z all together on one bill? It's like, well, because I'm in a small ass little college town on the beach, and it's 7-1 girls to guys here. Like, it's a great place to come play. It's a good show. Everybody wants to come play at Wilmington. So yeah, it was cool. And then hip hop too, but there was a lot of challenges in the South. You know, they don't like the rave scene because in the 90s, the Rave Act happened in the Carolinas, and it effectively shut down all of the clubs that were doing, you know, drum and bass and any of the kind of what was techno at the time. You know, there weren't all these variations.
Yeah, just for context for anyone listening that's not in our age category, I mean, I used to perform at raves in the 90s too. Like raves in America, when ecstasy jumped off in the mid 90s and the rave culture kind of came into youth culture, we were playing in barns in the middle of central Pennsylvania, barns in Nebraska. It would be like 2,000 kids out in the field. And it would just be insane, unregulated. People would be in a K-hole over here. People would be like, you know, doing their second pill of ecstasy over there. And it was just insane. But then you had crews like the Far Side, or you had crews like this and that were the hip hop component trying to get in on the scene. I don't know what they must have thought about it, but we were all at the same raves at the same time. And it was, for me, it opened up my eyes to the fact that, wow, all these different cultures can come together somehow. And there's no container yet. Because this is just happening, and this drug, ecstasy, is fueling it, and then ketamine's in there too. But I couldn't tell where it was gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, drugs always fuel musical revolutions in some ways, or at least they can be attached, you know. But that was the revolution of like just dance music, world dance music, I feel like too, and the crossover of a lot of different, you know, or like disco in the 80s vibes settling into a sort of like a new wave. You know, the technology was fostering all of this stuff too, because you didn't have these machines as easily accessible, especially until the 80s, you know, beat machines and MPCs and things like that. And then in the 90s, it was like, we all get computers. So now everybody's got a computer at home, and you can start really tracking the revolution from there.
Yeah,
of
that's
music just getting out so much more.
I mean, like, you know, they used to say when ATO Records, Dave Matthews' label, signed David Gray from the UK to Red Light Management and ATO, they kept on pushing him as a quote-unquote bedroom producer. But the thing that I kept on countering with is, it's the same damn computer whether you go into the studio or you're in your bedroom.
Right.
And the music industry had no intellectual way to kind of rationalize, well, computers are computers. If you've got Logic on the computer in the studio, you can have Logic on the computer at home. And I just remember, yeah, your sound treatment is different, but if you're an ingenuitive engineering kind of nerd like we are, you'll make it work. You'll figure it out. And then tubes are tubes, so you don't have to have the most expensive tube just to make the record. And sometimes the demo became the actual record that got released because the vibe got lost when you went into the actual biggest studio.
Right, fact, yeah.
And then the other thing is, just to put a bookend on the raves, it's the first time you start the party Friday night and it goes till Sunday night.
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd ever experienced that as a
Big
kid,
time, yeah.
You know, and it was like, I was just like, how are these people going? Because then, well, we'd call them disco biscuits, we'd call them E-tards, we'd call them like all sorts of stuff, but it was just to say that these people can go for 72 hours on these drugs, and I've never seen anything. This is like animalistic. It's just, you know.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it's, you know, during that time too, it was funny because I was so selective. Like I used to, you know, Dara and Chemical Brothers and things like that. There were a few tunes that I would be like, that shit is fire. But generally, during that 90s era, I was such a drummer, you know. I was a fan of like all the like 50s, 60s, from ragtime to hair metal, you know what I mean? I was like really into all that stuff because of the playability, you know, and the musicality that it takes to get to that point to execute it, you know. The thought of being on tour as a musician versus producers, you know, and also as a drummer, I'm like, fuck you guys, you're automating my role, you know? So I was a little adverse during those times, and I definitely loved the community aspect and everything that brought me in. And I remember thinking when I was younger that I was like, I get it. These people don't know like jazz and shit like that. So 4 on the Floor is the most accessible, humanistic, animalistic thing. It is what our biorhythms are based in, you know what I mean? Our breath, our pulse, our heartbeat, all these things, right?
Yeah, I heard somewhere 120 BPM is like the pace of the human heartbeat. That's why all this house music and everything in up-tempo starts at 120 and goes up from there.
Yeah, I always loved that. That was actually in high school, that was my senior exit project. It was on how, specifically drums, but music can affect your biorhythms and how you can use it to intentionally motivate or sedate your biorhythms, you know what I mean? And calm down or get excited or whatever. So there's a lot of cool shit there, but you know, the rave culture, and why I brought it up, the Rave Act made it really hard for less than 10 years later, almost, for people in the Carolinas especially to even acknowledge that I'm doing DJs and that I'm doing anything other than throwing that party to sell drugs. And the funny thing is, I never did those drugs. Like, I smoked weed from a young age. I didn't even drink alcohol. I would only really smoke weed. Then I tried some mushrooms, got into that world. But I never was into the pills. I you know, I was like, hey, respectfully yours, I'm just not into the chemical shit. Never really tried acid, none of that stuff. So it was funny to me as I started to throw parties and these police were just like, we know that you're selling the drugs. And it's like, dude, if you could really have been a bird on my shoulder, you know, or whatever, like a spider on the wall, and watched how many kids would come to my parties when I started throwing them and just be like, thank you so much for bringing this, DJ. Oh my God, I have to drive 6 hours or 8 hours to be able to see anything like this. And they would just give me a fistful of whatever pills. I'm like, no thanks. Like, thank you, like, and have fun, you know? Yeah. Don't show me that. I have to kick you out now, you know?
Me and Metaphor were definitely, back in the day, we used to do those 6 to 8 hour drives just to go to a rave and go like do a set and then hang out with, there was an MC named Dub2, there was like, oh my God, all these other names, they're gonna come back. I haven't thought about these names in like 20, 25 years.
Yeah. Lots of old, and I mean, that was the era too, is like that hybrid that we saw coming from hip hop linking with, like, pop music really linked with electronic first. Yeah. And then, I mean, you could argue that hip hop did as well, because those were produced beats. You know, it was just a boom bap instead of a up tempo.
What was it? Diesel Truckers on Prodigy's The Fat of the Land, when Kool Keith jumped onto that. Because like that Prodigy record, like with Firestarter and everything else on it, wasn't exactly rave, but wasn't exactly not. Right. And they got a lot of burn. But when Kool Keith jumped on Diesel Truckers, I was like, okay, this it's begun. Right, yeah. It's begun. Yeah. Kurt is engineering it, Cutmaster Kurt. Right. Bless up to Cutmaster Kurt, what's up? And Keith jumps on, and oh my God. Yeah, fire. He murked it. Yeah. He murked it. And it's like, for me, that's when like, I was like, oh, this can happen? And I mean, look, Ryu from Styles of Beyond was on a bunch of Crystal Method joints. Like there was stuff happening. Right. And eventually Q-Tip got onto some Basement Jaxx stuff, but that was so far removed that it was like, all right, now everyone's coming to join the party. But it was mind-blowing. Yeah. Mind-blowing.
I remember hearing grime rappers over like dubstep, like some dirty dubstep shit. And it was, Damn, there was also, I think it was a Mod Sun track, the sunlight blinds my eyes, something like that. It was like a hook, but then, you know, it has this it's all like fucking dubsteppy.
I mean, that's when you said Datsik, I like
right.
My mind lit up because I'm a big Datsik fan.
But like that's, you know, then this grime rapper comes in over this track and I was just like, ugh, that is just so nasty. That's a perfect fucking harmony that hasn't happened before.
Have you ever heard of Foreign Beggars out the UK?
Yeah.
And then and like the work they did with Noisia?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A great example. Like
So-
it has come, there's a lot of cross collaboration, right? And like I love that as well.
I think, and Pavin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been told, because I might not have been sober when I did this, I think I named the Foreign Beggars.
Oh, nice.
Because we lived in a house off Caledonian Road for a little bit, and they let me crash.
Yeah.
And so I tried to make myself of value and use whenever I could. That might have been one of those moments.
Yeah, fair.
Might not have been, but like I was told a number of times that I was the dude that did that, and I was like, oh really? But that happens.
Man, yeah. That's also something that I feel like, I guess it still happens a little bit, but it's less now. It used to be such a culture of like, who am I gonna stay with in that town while we're through, you know, on tour? And it's really not that way anymore. It's bus tours and hotels.
No, but you got someone right now, like, I mean, we'll get into it in the conversation, but you got someone right now who just moved from Texas to LA yesterday.
That's right, yesterday.
After y'all were on tour. And it's kind of the same thing with me and Pavin and Dag and everyone else. And like, I was like, oh, my time's running out in the place I'm staying in London. I wonder if I can crash with the homies.
Yeah.
And eventually I crashed with the homies. That lasted a number of months, and then, you know, I got up and went to Bangkok.
Right.
And it was just like, you know, but in that time period, it was like intense. I remember me and Pavin used to do 6 shows a night.
Yeah.
Going up and down like bam, 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 hip hop shows, drum and bass shows. And like, he was a monster on the come up.
Right.
Monster.
Yeah.
And like, I was proud because I was an Indian MC from Brooklyn, living in London. This dude had every flex on every style and could do any party. Me, I was like, okay, I could do some jump up, I could do this, I could do that. For an American MC at that point to even know in 2001 what jump up MCing was. But then I came up in the rave scene in the 90s too, so I had an acumen. But dude, this guy really did it. He really did it next level. And I mean, they went through the US with Skrillex on the Mothership tour and everything else, and like I watched them blow, but I don't know, I'm really proud of them, but this is part of that culture that we're discussing right now. And the fact that you're sitting right in front of me and like we've been circling for this long and like we haven't talked, well, we talk, but not in front of people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good.
But what I also want people to understand is your journey, because you began as a musician and we've qualified that, and you've got it in your soul, the backbeat. But I believe that the drummers, whether it's the Questloves or the J Zones or the Stubblefields or the Cannonball Aderlys or anybody, the drummers, they keep the precision in the timing. And there's something spiritually and psychologically that happens when you're a percussionist. Not all percussionists, but I think in modern times, the drummer actually has this subconscious psychological reaction to the environment around us. And it's always about timing and precision. And it's not just limited to the drum kit. It's not just limited, it's all elements in life.
Yeah.
Which makes me like, I see how many girls come after you. Maybe your sexual rhythm is better. I don't know. This is just conjecture, but maybe my lips to God's ears, but.
No, you know, it's like I said before, when I was in that class and I started in through university learning about the holistic musical piece, right, as my role in it and thinking about those. That's a lot of drummers that I talk to have that mentality as well, because you are kind of the conductor a lot of times, right, where there isn't one. And you're leading and you are thinking at least a few bars ahead, because you're thinking, how am I gonna bring everybody into this change? How am I gonna, do it effectively, but also tastefully, And yeah, that translates over to a lot. I mean, Quest is a great example. Like all the businesses that he is involved in, and like all the pieces, he's just a meticulous, organized person, and it is something that comes around. And I think part of that too is a conditioning that you go through as a musician or as a creative, but certainly as a drummer, where you are building your chops for a long time. You know, you can't do it right away because your muscles won't. You know, like you can't build the control that you want right away. It's not something you can learn. You can understand the concept of how to get there, but you got to put in the time, the work, right? And you spend all this time learning, especially if you go through school. You know, you learn the blue book, you learn all the standards, you learn 100 other new jazz songs, you know what I mean, that you cover for different performances, recitals, whatever, you know, to like validate your process of growth through the system of learning. And one of the things that one of my teachers told me was, you know, now that you have learned, like in my graduation phase, he was like, now that you've learned all this stuff, the key is to stop thinking about that and just play. And there's a book that I love that I mentioned to you the other day, and actually that the homie who just moved here is reading right now. It's called Effortless Mastery, and it talks about this concept of stocking your pond of knowledge, you know, and building this wealth that you have at your tool belt, at your disposal, and then forgetting about meticulously sifting through that for what you're gonna do, but just existing very much in the moment, thinking as much forward as you need to prepare what you're about to play, but being very in the moment, you know, and just channeling that flow, and that the music comes through you, you know, that it doesn't come from you. You are just a lightning rod for what's out there, because everything has been played, whether it's sang or another instrument or something like that. There's really, I would argue, probably nothing. I'll say probably just for my perfectionism of not getting pigeonholed into somebody being like, not 100%, whatever. But most things are that way, you know? So, yeah, I love that book, and I love that part of life that the application of that learning has, you know, where in the world, you know, especially working in events and being on tour and running around, like you cannot control everything. You cannot stress about controlling everything. You can be as on top of it as you think that you can be, cross all the T's, dot all the I's. There are always OSFs, I call them, oh shit factors. You can't plan them, they just happen, and then you go, oh shit. All right, so now solution time, right? How am I gonna get past this, move forward? And I think that energy is palpable. You know, there's an electrical energy that we all carry, and when it's a confidence, it's I think can be misconstrued as ego, but I think it's more an understanding that it's gonna be, whether it's gonna be all right or it's not gonna be all right, it's gonna be.
Well, I mean, I've always thought of you as a musician first. I've never thought of it, and I've met you in many different contexts on our collective journey here.
Yeah.
And I've met you as the big promoter guy. I've met you as the venture capitalist startup guy. I've met you as like, did you get into the Bitcoin stuff for a little bit?
Oh,
you
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
You did. I recall some of that. And now you're helping to, you were an experiential guy at South by Southwest and all these other festivals for a number of years, bringing brands and artists and ideas together in context. And I remember when I was producing for LG, we were trying to put stuff together. But now you're also providing yurts and things for the outdoor festival seasons. And you're constantly going, but to me, much like you, I learned how to program, how to code when I was 7. I learned how to rhyme when I was 8. 2 very highly disciplined practices.
Right. Yeah.
That discipline is what I apply to everything else. So for me, yes, I'm a lyricist, the type of lyricist I am in Rakim. And like when I write, it's precision, right? Mm-hmm. Because Rakim is the god. And like you write for the act of precision, even if nobody else is ever gonna hear it. It's just your book, you know? And no one needs to hear it. And now because my book is my training, I can freestyle, and my freestyles sound like writtens. Yeah. But the programming also kept me disciplined. Remember, this is like 1983 or 84. I'm learning all this shit. So like I was ahead of, my dad was working for the government doing what he was doing, and he brought computers home and he would be like, you need to learn this.
Right.
So I did.
Yeah.
And now here we are, like literally 40 years later.
Yeah.
And
I remember visiting my dad, and there's a kid across the street who was from Miami, and he was a computer nerd. He just would like take his computer apart and put it back together.
There you go.
And that shit, I was like, dude, what?
Yep.
Who does that?
Exactly.
And then I was like, that's actually pretty rad. Like,
so for me, for the way my mind locks around things, for me, every grouping of people, even when it's my girlfriend and me and my friends, we're always in a band. That's my dynamic. My dynamic is I crew up or I'm in a band. And when I'm with you, I know that I'm a lyricist and you're percussionist. And like you give me the rhythm and I know how to flow on top of your rhythm.
Right.
And I think of it that way. It's just natural for me to fall in. And every time we fall in, no matter where we are in the country or the world, because we keep meeting up everywhere, I just know he got the backbeat rhythm. I'm gonna flow on top of it. And that's why it works.
Right.
And for so many other groupings of people, it doesn't work that way.
Or they don't have an accessible connecting point like that. You know, music is the universal language. It doesn't matter what other languages you speak, like you speak your instrument. And that's such a big point of connectivity, you know? Like I can walk into that room last night, you know? We were all there. And
let the people know. Let the people know.
Oh,
or do we not want to blow up the spot?
The spot's dope. It's a Tuesday night jazz jam.
We don't need to say where it was.
I'll throw out that Jazz Eclectic LA. That's the crew.
I mean, if that place gets any more packed with beautiful people that love music, I don't know if I'd be able to go because I like being like a little low key.
Yeah.
It's definitely, last night was not a low key spot.
Yeah.
But I was definitely enjoying it. There was like Australia's top pop star popped up and just did a set and
Aston,
like and just it's what one thinks about Hollywood when they don't come from Hollywood.
Totally. Yeah.
And so the same way I guess like whenever me and my squad, big up Gecko, big up everyone else, like when they come to something in Brooklyn, it's what they imagined would be happening in Brooklyn when they go, you know? So
no, it was good. And that all of us could have walked up there and just done it.
Yeah.
Like, and now you and Show hadn't been there before, but I know either one of you could have walked up and done the thing.
Thrown down. And it would have been like
musicians have.
Yeah, that famous guy from Texas, that guy from India, like we're all in the room. And you just out of respect and love, you grab a mic and you do the thing and it's like, it's magic.
But not a lot of other people have that point, you know? I mean, if you play a sport, you could say that's a thing, kinda, but nothing really. Dancing probably does. I mean, you know, there's I think things that have more artistic expression and more of yourself imbued in the thing that you're doing or while you're doing it has more connection, but music is just one of those things. And so people who are musicians, I think naturally have this ability to connect and to, you know, be out there. And I've always been that personality, surely, very outgoing, ambitious from a young age, you know, and you know how it is coming when you come from not having, when you are a have-not, you realize steps you got to take, you know, and whether you're gonna continue the cycle or break it, you know. And so I think having that ambition and being, to your point, like having all these different facets of people knowing me, the most interesting thing is that when I really shifted and I left the Carolinas to first start Peerless and doing like influencer gifting and alignment deals and crazy stuff, my friends in the Carolinas were like, what job is that? Like, what do you even do?
I gotta say, you're always first. You're always first line infantry. Like once something pops off, and that's why I was referencing crypto, like as Ethereum was first being introduced, you were one of the first people up in New York going like, yo, you gotta get on the crypto. And then before that, it was like, yo, you gotta get onto the influencer marketing. And before that, it was like, yo, hip hop's not gonna be the mainstay, everything, nor will dubstep be. This bro step's gonna go out, this is gonna come in. That's why I'm like, we're looking at the playing field, the battleground the same way.
And when you travel a lot and when you put yourself out there, you see these patterns, you know. It's not, I feel like, you know, Steve Jobs said it best. He said it's about taste. You have to expose yourself to all of the very best things that humans have done and then take that and put it into what you do every day. And when you are moving around the world or when you're just paying attention to people who are making moves around the world and you see something and you go, okay, it strikes me a certain way, but more importantly, you see the effect that it has. And when you start to work in those environments where effect really matters, you naturally just pick up this, you know, talent for spotting something that reminds you of other things that you've seen go. And the world is such that the social component and who we are culturally is blending more and more as the internet is spreading and giving us access to the same types of content and whatever. So if something exists over here and is budding and emerging and people really love it, chances are any other place where those similar people exist, that thing is going to be great there too. And that's really, I think, you know, the magic of foresight in the sense of like prediction or whatever. It's really just, you know, we're all sort of copying in some way. We're like inspired by something that we saw was really sick, and then we took that and put it into whatever we were doing, and this new hybrid comes from that alchemy.
I mean, the saying used to be great artists steal.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That when we were growing up, remember?
Facts, definitely.
But for me, it's like, I think great artists are great people now, because I think every human, I've always been on this soapbox saying every human is creative. It's just when you get out of childhood, these adults try to beat it out of you. And definitely. I think, and it's like in every culture, I don't care what culture it is, for some reason, once you exit childhood, creativity is only done by these certain people. Yeah. No, man, we were all children at one point. We came out the same. Like, okay, a lot of us disadvantaged in this direction, a lot of us advantaged in that direction. It's never the same DNA, but you're creative. Yeah. Because your imagination is the fairy tale world that constructs this entire universe. And somehow then you, quote unquote, get socialized. Yeah. Right? And then domesticated, socialized, and then that's where like psychology comes in, because your local community defines your socialized norms or your social norms, and then within the context of that community, they can decide whether you're crazy or not, only because of the bounding rules of your socialization. And that creates your psychosis. And then if you go into therapy, it's like, you know, when I started therapy, it was like I was code switching so much. I was like, I live in New York, but then I live between New York and London and Bangkok and India. And in every single one of these places, nothing's similar. The children are having dissimilar experiences, except for when they're like young and they're using their imagination. You can throw like a Cambodian child, an Indian child, a British child, and a LA child into the same room, and they'll figure out, they'll imagine their way to play with each other, you know? Because there's no restriction.
Especially the younger they are.
Exactly, exactly. They'll figure out how to like become their own band, so to speak. But it's crazy that we live in a place where this kind of conversation doesn't happen often. And like, you know, I argue with a lot of my peers and colleagues and friends. I'm like, put your kids into this, put your kids into that. I know this program, I know that program. Let me get them the Questlove Kid drum set or whatever. Right. And for some of them, they really stick to it and they get it because they're already doing it. For others, they're like, I don't know, drum set in here, I don't know. And they're just like feeding them the iPad and they're just doing the other thing. And I'm like, well, then this is going to shift the reality of where the imagination takes us, because now it's adults programming these apps for kids and infiltrating the psyche. They're creating their own...
Deciding what's good.
The social norm now for the community is this digital landscape. Right. So a 5-year-old could be listening to this. And if you are, you're on the come up. But chances are, you know, we're going into uncharted territory, and I think that's why it's important for us to actually, we do this talk whenever we have a couple of drinks in us, and like this has been like over a decade of us talking this way, but to put it in front of people, there's value to it that we don't even see yet, because even when I step into a boardroom to negotiate a deal for this or that or so-and-so, it's coming from the pulpit of that creative kid that had to learn how to program and then rhyme. I'm still that, what's your self-image? I'm still, in my head, I'm like half programmer, half battle MC, but I could be like program manager for LG Signature, trying to put together the global campaign, rolling it out, and, you know, like,
I think we have so much ability anymore, you know, and our self-view, you know, is such an amalgamation of all the things that we do. And I don't know how much dissimilar that is from human beings throughout time. I just don't know how much maybe access to so many things people had historically, right? Like before the internet, you had to read a lot of books to be good at something.
There you go. You know, Ice-T said when I was a kid, 2 things that I love that he said when I was a kid, which made me always rock with him. One was, I don't drink booze, I drink milk. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Because he was the OG. He created the term OG. If the guy and he's like, I drink milk, I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. I got you. Obviously, as I grew older, the milk kind of got substituted for other things. But the other thing that he was really, really, really emphatic upon back during the Fight the Power days when Chuck and Flav were going and everyone, and Ice Cube was going with America's Most, he said, the place where they hide all the secrets is in books. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm of Indian origin and descent, right? But I was socialized into hip-hop culture. So for me, I leaned into hip-hop, I leaned away from the temple, right? Because the mantras were raps to me in Sanskrit. So I was like, let me just do that in English and figure out my way. Mm-hmm. And that lit my path. But I needed an elder like Ice-T to remind me, because even ancient African culture, we're coming from brilliant societies. We're coming from brilliant dynastic backgrounds.
Oh yeah, our genetic memory contains so much that just requires a forced, pressured situation to unlock.
And Ice-T was emphatic, and this is where I feel the power of hip-hop. You need elders like us, because we're the ones making the records that you might not want to hear in the club. It might not always bang in the car, but at some point between the study beats or this or that, you want to hear what this knowledge, this is how we're imparting knowledge from generation to generation. And it doesn't require that you have Sony, Universal, this, that, and the other, Def Jam, whatever behind it. Mm-hmm. What matters is you get behind it and you put it out there as knowledge to be absorbed by the people in general, right? Mm-hmm. He said they hide all the secrets in books. And he was like, you can't tell me nothing. And he was like, that was the year he also gave the commencement speech at Harvard as the OG. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I had that speech, he put out a poster of the speech with him in the middle of his face, and he was like that, and it said OG, but it was his Harvard speech. And it was like the commencement. That's what we need to get hip hop back to.
Well,
we've got
everybody musically needs to be more, I hate the term woke. People need to be
I don't like woke either.
They need to be more aware of the things that they have access to, and less, I think. It's easy to fall in line.
I want to talk about that because maybe we can define it a little bit better, because your brain and my brain kind of align in a certain way. I didn't like when they called all of us conscious rappers in the 90s, just because, and for me, I was less conscious, more punchline, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't like that label, because Common was labeled as conscious rapper. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, the native tongues were conscious rappers, and consciousness was not cool. It was seen as and I don't like the term woke necessarily. We need another term that evolves it into something more artistic in general. And I don't like that in the commercialized version of selling people things, we've got to label it as good or bad. And I don't like...
it's just knowledge. It's just being knowledgeable and present and aware, Because
I'll tell you what, to me, Juice WRLD might not have been a hip-hop artist, to me. I thought he was more driving down the middle, what's coming for the pop lane, right? The mad, accessible lane.
Yeah.
But to me, he was conscious. Because he was speaking from an emotional platform. And say what you want about Drake, being in his feelings and all that kind of stuff. And if you've seen You People, they go through a 10-minute dialogue of comparing to different eras of Drake's work.
Yeah.
That's different. That's different because I feel you write that way on purpose. I think Juice WRLD was just experiencing and then projecting.
Like X too. Triple X.
Yes.
Another example of that, just doing it, There's a lot of people trying to find the lane that works and then jump into it. That is a sad thing to see, that they see that there's an elevator over there, and so they're gonna go up there and wait in line to be in that elevator rather than build stairs, or make a new pathway or whatever, just do whatever it is that they do. I think there's a lot of fear in that, right? There's a lot of fear of rejection, disapproval, or whatever. People don't like to be bad at a thing. I think that's why instruments stopped becoming so popular. Of course, there's technology and accessibility. But you can get really good on an MPC real fast.
Yeah, it's about
tap
speed.
out a beat and you can press that button, which triggers a sample. Okay, you know, there's this discourse that comes with and discipline that comes with getting into it long term.
Here's my hope. Here's my hope, because I'm one of those kids where in the 90s, I figured out how to rig together things. I used to make pause tapes. I used to do this, do that. Yes. And then I had a 4-track recorder. And eventually, you know, I sampled records a whole lot, you know, like everyone around me. But eventually, by the time I was like 16, I was like, I want real things, because I want to record the real things and sample those. Mm-hmm. And this is in the early 90s. So like, I'm hoping that having the access to all the technology, like I know a lot of kids that come at me with beats and everything, and it happens in my DMs, and I'm like, yo, I got a subscription to Splice as well. Mm-hmm. And if you listen, sometimes when I want to pump out a thing and just throw it out, I'll use Splice samples. Right. I'll use any of that stuff, because it's prefabricated. And then if you look at the patterns of the release on my label, I might just use those samples as an idea starter, get it thrown out there, and then all of a sudden someone hits me up for a licensing deal, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then I'll, like, many months later, I'll come back with a stack of 10 remixes, because then it's like everyone around me is like, oh, I like that joint. Okay, let's sit down, let's play the instruments, let's sample ourselves and do it. Because now I think that the thought can evolve that way, right? Because you can put out one song in September, and then by December, put out like a stack of 6 remixes or reinterpretations, because there's no rules. But my point is, I use those things as an idea starter, or I might start with Ableton with any sampling things and doing MIDI, and then eventually I'll move, and I haven't figured out for myself, is my process just to make demos of albums with all those sample starters, then move it over to playing everything and putting out only the things I got played? I don't know, because certain people like it when I'm flipping samples, and other people really like it when it's organic.
Right.
And we're just in this new age. My hope is, in taking that long journey of conversation, that there's people like me where it's like, you get frustrated with just pushing the MPC button with the sample triggered, and you eventually go into, well, let me get some drumsticks. Yeah. Okay, if I get drumsticks and paint buckets, that's how I started. Paint buckets, drumsticks, pots, pans. Let me try to replay percussion. Then let me EQ that percussion. Let me do that.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing some of that. The folks that really got heavy into Ableton are shape-shifting sounds. Mm-hmm. So like, you've got all of your different factions now, which didn't exist like even 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, like, well, I mean, and there were times, like, there are hip-hop stories of, you know, crate digging for samples, can't find it, and so somebody sits down on the kit and just plays it out real quick or whatever. And like, sometimes that necessity is, like I said about our genetic memory, like, just takes a forced situation for you to realize that this creativity is within you. And you were talking about creativity earlier, like, there's another quote I love, I can't remember who it is, it says, like, the creative adult is the child who survived. My homie in North Carolina has this brand, Kuga. Shout out, Kellen. He's a real tasty designer, just has like real fresh designs. Anyway, he has this one shirt that has one of his cartoon, like, patchwork bear images on the back. But the front has that quote. And when I saw that quote, I was like, that shit is fire. Like, I definitely need to have that shirt, you know? And it's so true. We lose that, like you were talking about, you know, you get acclimated to society and thinking other things matter, you know, and have to do some things. Sometimes you have to do things that you can't, you know, help. You have family things or whatever else that require you. But there is more of a resurgence and people learning how to play instruments now, for sure. And
I've been waiting. I'm so tired of hearing samples all the time.
Well, and last night's a great example of just seeing, like,
just old school jazz
fuck up some instruments.
Yeah, and it's just like,
so good.
Yo, it was so refreshing to see younger people singing jazz standards in Hollywood.
Right.
Like, that's not been a regular thing for a hot second.
That's why those watering holes for me are such touch points. They're like rejuvenative touch points, you know, where you go, especially working in electronic music for 10 years and like being a part of that wave and whatever, and like again, like earlier you asked, like, who do you see yourself as?
Yes.
One of the things, many things, but one of the things I see myself as is that kid who didn't like electronic music really, because they're just automating instead of playing the instruments, a group of people up on stage doing the thing live and like communicating energetically and sending out actual waves that they are frequencies they're creating in that moment, that they're like with the stroke of something is creating that moment instead of being like rehashed through a system at a different hertz rate or whatever, right? So yeah, there's a whole element of that shift that I'm so excited that people are starting to get more, and I've called it out for some time now. I've been saying like people are going to look for the players again, and it's only because I wanted it partially, but I saw it happening. You know, you see like the occasional who's a good example? Sullivan King is a great example. You know, I worked with a production school here, a boutique production school for a little while when I first moved to Hollywood, and was running their social media and stuff, and there was a bunch of really awesome, you know, guys that came through there, guys and girls just doing crazy stuff. Jaws was one of them, went huge. Sullivan King is this other one. Sullivan King, I love referencing him because he's a metal guitar player who got into producing, but he was producing, you know, dubstep, we always said was like the metal of electronic music, and he got that lane on lock.
I would say bro step more specifically.
Yeah, fair. Like, but he's this guy who looks like he just stepped off stage with Pantera. Long hair, full rock mode, plays a badass electric guitar, and he's melting faces on stages to his own dubstep and like, you know, bro step and these like sort of like different electronic rhythms that he creates. And it's such a joy to see. It was such a joy to see him blow up, because it's like, that is validation right there, what we've been talking about. That is a group of kids who didn't grow up with actual musicians. That was their parents' music. That wasn't cool. And now they're at a phase where they're seeing a player and they're just jaw dropped from being like, how's he doing it? And it's like, hey, you can do it too. That's how every other person who played an instrument ever felt. They saw somebody who was great and were like, you're just a human too. I got hands, I got fingers, I can do that, you know? So I'm excited for that revolution and to see where it goes. It's hard to imagine new genres of music based on everything that we have, but the hybridization of these genres that we're seeing is gonna be the next, you know, impetus.
And on that note, well, we just did an hour. Hey. But on that note, dude, this is the first of many conversations that I want to have with you, because this is just the setup. Because, you know, the purpose for this podcast is music being the medium. But then we both do so many other things that I want to come back and talk about things succinctly, because you've worked in the mental health space, you've worked in the tech space, you've worked in the research space, you've worked in every single kind of space. And as things evolve, I see what you're doing now with the new artists that you're starting to kind of help nurture and develop. And I've seen this in you because I know it's in me, but this pattern that's emerging in you, I'm now proud, because I used to be the guy taking you to like the Standard Hotel and all that in New York, and like I used to be one of the many guys in New York you had, but I was like, hey, I'm Brooklyn Shanti, come along with me. Questlove's doing this, or Nicodemus is doing that, or whatever. Let's go run through. Let's go say what up. Exactly. And like, but now you're the one doing that for the younger cats. And like, I see it and my heart gets really warm and happy. And it's part of why I want to stick around here, because I want to see where this leads. We got the vibe. Right. You know, the bookend, and it's something weird. Don't ask me why. But I moved out here and I started listening to a lot more Guns N' Roses, a lot more Doors, a lot more foundational rock bands. Because in my imagination, again, I didn't grow up here. I've only played here, toured here, visited here. 2017, I was here for a few months and I tapped out. I was like, I'm out. I don't know. It's another country out here, right? So, and then I went back to Brooklyn. But this time I've been here, this is the longest exposure I've had out here. And it just is different. It makes you write different music while you're here. Yeah. It is a different mode altogether. And I'm only coming into that right now.
that energy, like I said, man, it's not coming from you, it's coming through you, it's moving through you. And, you know, there's so much energy here. So yeah, it's to be continued, you know, let's keep it alive. I'm excited to just be around. I've always opened my doors to artists, you know, this room has actually housed a lot of amazing artists, some who are no longer with us, rest in peace to them. But, you know, a lot of the places that I've had, you know, Brooklyn, Austin, LA, Carolinas, I've always housed a lot of talent, you know, and I like to keep that accessibility, but I've always been very adverse to being a manager, as you know.
Yeah. I mean, so we were talking about this because I think what the Foreign Beggars were doing back in the day was an incubator house. And then me and gayQ, that was definitely an incubator house for a number of scenes. And then you've got an incubator house. And like, we're just all incubating all the talent around us that we see coming and going. For me, I got to a certain age where I couldn't hold down my girlfriend and I couldn't hold down other things if I had too many people in my home. So I had to like discontinue that.
Right.
But there's other ways now that I'm a middle-aged man, like there's other ways it could be done.
Yeah.
It's just I haven't figured that out yet and I don't know where I'm gonna do it, but
one of the
coming.
LA things is the influencer house. You know, in the pandemic, I really revisited this kind of concept that I had been interested in a while and kind of saw becoming more. I worked with brands in 2011 and doing a brand house was like a new idea then, but not very new. But now and in the pandemic, it became very common. So that's one area where, like, can we Robin Hood this? Can we get the money from the areas and create a big house, a big place where people can be, more opportunity? We're seeing it happen, but
it's gonna
LA is definitely
it's gonna be different because, like, you know, I come from an era pre-Me Too, pre-this, pre-that, look, I'm a little Indian guy, so like I've been called everything from the N-word to camel jockey to like whatever. Like I come from a different like phase of humanity and civilization, and then I've grown into my midlife in this current thing. I don't know how comfortable putting these spaces together would be. It feels to me like people are a little more polarized these days.
But people are a product of their experiences and influences. And if you can that's one of the things that's great about being, like I remember when I turned 30, suddenly people gave me a lot more credibility in the things that I was doing for 10 years already, you know? Maybe because I've been doing it for 10 years, but off gate, just knowing I was in my 30s, they just were like, you're more trustworthy. Same thing when you get to 40s, I'm sure 50s, sure 60s, as you go.
As you get older, the thing that you contemplate is liability insurance.
Right. But the young cats want to know. They see you as that OG. They come into a space when you host the space and you have that and you can like create the...
I've had some mixed experiences.
Yeah.
I've had some, I think, younger cats, if they're good, if they're virtuosos. When we were virtuosos and young, we shut the fuck up. That component is not always in place now. Because I think there's trolling culture, there's digital culture, there's also, you know, when Facebook first launched, I thought it was like ultimately corruptive that you had to think of yourself in the third person just to make a post. You know, Xander Farr is...
that too, yeah.
So it messed up a lot of people's like executive functioning.
Yeah.
So I see the result of that now because I saw it when it got rolled out, and now I see the people that are destroyed by it because they never learned to not do that. That's all ego-based. It's all hubris.
That's right.
So it's like, 100%. So when I encounter, it's not just one person, it's many people across many different continents. The human brain just got wired differently. Therefore, sometimes I'm imparting wisdom, but it's not seen as that. It's seen as being combative. And I'm like, look, there's a human experience and then there's this digital experience, and the digital world is all contrived by corporations. Even this podcast going out on a platform specifically from the UK is a corporation trying to leverage a few curators around the world, like their knowledge base.
Right.
Because eventually they want to make money off this.
Totally, yeah.
And so this isn't me like altruistically sitting down. It's saying like, okay, I've tried the altruism and nobody's listened. Let's go to the people that want to make some money, and maybe people will listen through that, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just bullshitting. I'm from another era and I got to be gone. Yoda was in a fucking swampy bog and couldn't be found for a reason, and people need to remember that.
Right.
All the people that hold the knowledge as the elders will fucking hide from you if you don't treat them right.
Right. Well, and look, even at the Greek, these guys lived in caves, literally removed from society, hermits out there. You had to go. And the same thing with Asian culture and like seeking, the great teachers.
Yeah.
You had to go through the fucking valley, the hills, climb a crazy mountain full of, you had to get to them.
And everybody thinks because they can touch you and look at you and look at your Instagram and everything that they know you, and furthermore, they can treat you. I have been told by no less than 6 people in their 20s, I want you to treat me like an equal. And I look at them and I'm like, A, I could be your parent, and B, you will never be my equal. Yeah. Because I've endured experiences you'll never have to.
Yeah.
And then by the time you're my age, I'll be 20 years beyond, and you'll have gone through things that I won't be able to comprehend.
Well, the concept of equality is a connotative thing anyway, right? It is a thought, a feeling, like I respect you, I give you that, whatever. I can like treat you equally in the sense like, basic things, but the actual denotative, like, are you equal? No 2 people are equal. Aren't we all unique? Like, let's remember that as well. Like, we're all individuals.
While I'm on my rant,
talk to him.
Just because you break bread and drink the same wine as the older cat at the table that's done everything more than you, and y'all got drunk, and y'all got fucked up and everything, does not make you that person's equal. It doesn't make you have no right to that scenario or situation, especially if that elder is paying for everything. Right. There's something happening there in tradition, in artistic and creative class tradition. If you're a younger head, and I know you're struggling, I'm not looking at you for this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
But I do expect you to behave yourself.
Right.
You don't have to pick up the tab, you don't have to do this and that. And there have been a number of people, continent independent, where it's just like, yeah, I could bang out a video, I could do this for you. I'm vibing. This is what I do. I'm bringing what I bring to the table. And then you want me to pay for dinner? Cool. We'll wrap up this, that, and the other. Oh, and then you want to sleep on my couch? Cool.
Yeah.
Because this is the tradition.
Right.
We've been given the gift. But I'm a little bit further in my journey, and I see the value. If you can observe how the gift is working through me, it's an educational experience for you.
That's right, yeah.
Don't look at it as, now I'm gonna go turn around and flip this on them. And that nature, that's dangerous because it's karma.
That's right.
Because if an elder takes you in and shows you a few moves and pays for your dinner, I'm flush sometimes and sometimes I'm broke.
Right.
That's the reality of the situation.
Right, yeah.
But if I take you in and I show you some things, teach you some new dance moves, proverbially speaking, that's what I did out of the goodness of my heart. And you have no idea what's going on. This is why you cannot be my equal, because you don't understand, like, I might have just broken up with my fiance. I might have this, I might have that.
Right.
My mom might have just died.
Right.
And I might have invited you to sleep on my couch.
Right.
Like, you don't know that. And even if you do, you're not processing it because you're like 10 years, 20 years away from the moment that I'm having right now.
Right.
Therefore, how dare you?
Right.
And that happens, and it happens to people around me. It happens to the legends.
Oh yeah,
that,
especially
that
the
I'm
legends,
exposed to.
because the youngest cats that are finding the success didn't come up with that same shit that those legends came up with.
But it's also your first taste. And when it's your first taste, you gotta temper that sentiment because we've already been up and down. This has been a fucking roller coaster, merry-go-round, and a pinwheel. Like, it's the entire amusement park at one time.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you got people that have kicked their habits or child support issues or like domestic violence issues or this or that. Like,
so much life happening alongside whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
And for you snot-nosed little piece of need to pay some dues. Like, you're just witnessing this with wide eyes, and that's fine.
Right.
But it's a complex, it's not a fairy tale for us anymore.
Yeah.
It's just the life that we've leaned into, and this is the only life we've got. You still have options to get the fuck out of Dodge. That's why we don't trust you yet. Because you could one day take all of this, poof it away, and become like a fucking investment banker or whatever.
Like so many have.
And that's why I think it's important for people to understand, and this is why I wanted to have the conversation with you. For a few of us, we get the option to go and learn a new trade, and we add it to the musical toolkit. It's not I'm looking at this big thing of Coachella behind you right now.
Yeah.
And what I'm reminded of is not like all the great musical acts. In the context of this artist space, this is a representation of the artists, the event, and the brands that financed the artists' creative desires together under one context, right? And for you, that was Coachella for a little while, South by for a little while, but you were an ultimate catalyst. You visited as the alien quantity, which I'm part of too. We're from the same mothership. I understand what the suits want to hear. I understand what the creatives need.
Right.
There are very few of us living in the translation layer. And when we are done with our job, they fucking forget who we are.
Facts.
And if we did our job right, they never knew we were there to begin with. And that's the fucking role that we play.
Yeah.
And there's no title for it.
It's a tough buffer. Yeah. I always get asked like what I do and get the weird runaround about like, you know, whatever the position is. People are like, I don't get that. It's like, it doesn't fit into a box. You know, there are all these elements and in so many situations, just that as you bring that up, man, my mind just spins through all of the experiences of these times where, you know, the two sides are unable to communicate, but there is a resultant thing that is going to happen where they're both involved and they need that translator. They need that, you know, someone who understands the creative and the process and what's going to happen and also understands the needs and the timelines and whatever, but how those needs and timelines reasonably can bend without breaking.
Yeah.
And also how you can push reasonably without offending the creative side, you know, and it's a very difficult balance.
It's social engineering, but it's also, you have to be an empath from the beginning of life and you have to learn how to walk on water. And even then, they're not gonna pay you right and they're not gonna care who you are. And you have to be okay with that going into each and every interaction because you have to know that the sum of the intention of me going into this is to leave it better. And then the world can hopefully experience something new and great and wonderful. And the world might not do it during our lifetime. We might be doing this little piece of what we're working on just so that 100 years from now, it can be reflected upon and influenced.
Big facts. To throw another quote, the world will be great when old men plant seeds for trees, the shade of which they'll never experience.
There's not a goddamn thing I can say after that. We are done with this one.
Respect.
I love you, Xander.
Love you too, brother.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
And with that, we just about out of here. Remember to follow me on socials at Brooklyn Shanti. That's on YouTube, that's on IG, that's on Twitter. You know, I don't always be everywhere all the time, but when I do pop up, I pop up. Thanks for locking it in on Brooklyn Shanti Presents. We just gonna keep it pushing.